Welcome back, csc230 class, to our ex2 CSS exercise that we'll be working on, where we're basically taking our ex1 that we did first and we're going to be adding CSS to it. Now you will not have this, so I'm already in my workspace. Now I have one called ex2 finished because I obviously wanted to make sure I worked on it and had a finished product to show you before I started working on it, but I'm going to go through working on it a little bit with you. You may fast forward through some things. What you are going to do is you're going to, instead of starting working on your ex1, which you have in here and you have finished, you're going to duplicate this. So once you get into your 230 workspace, you're going to right click on here and they have an option called duplicate, and you're going to duplicate that entire folder of ex1, and it makes it ex1.1. Now we're going to call it 2, so I'm going to go in here, and you could right click and rename, or I think if you click on the name it'll let you rename it, but I'll go to rename and I'm going to call it ex2, and I'm going to put -css so we kind of know what it is, so we're going to call that CSS. So now that basically duplicated our folder, and it's going to have the same index file. It has our ex1 header. I'm even going to rename this, and I'm going to rename our image, and I'm going to call it ex2 because we're now working on ex2. Everything that has ex1 I'm going to change in this folder. So I'm even going to open up my index. Now be very careful because there is an index for your ex2 folder and there still is an index for your ex1 folder. Make sure that you're in your ex2. I'm going to open up my index for my ex2-css, and this is what it should look like. There should be nothing in here, and we're going to do all our styles in here. We may have to make some changes to our HTML, which we will. And the first change I'm going to make is I'm going to change my h1 to say ex2. It says listen link, and I'll even just put CSS after it. And then I'll also do it to my title, because up here we also have ex1. I'll make that ex2, and I'll just put a space and put CSS, just so that my title, and again I'm working in my ex2-css that I duplicated. So any reference to ex1, I'm changing it to ex2, including here in my header. So my header image, because remember the image that I have in here is now called ex2, but I'm going to change this one so everything matches up. So your image in your ex2 folder is going to be ex2 header. It should reference the ex2 header here, and everything else should reference ex2. And that's all you should really have to change on your HTML so far. We may have to add some other things into our HTML, but right now we're going to be working in our style tags. And what we want to do first, and I could even open this up if I want to. I'll even save what I have so far. I'll just save the changes I made so far. And if you remember, if you want to open this up, this is my original. And I'm going to close this up because that was a preview from the original, so I'm going to close that up. What I'm going to open up is this one, is preview this one. And I'll just go to preview, live preview, and it puts that little window there, which you can work in, but I prefer to have it open up in the browser. So what I usually do is I go to this little icon here and I open it up in its own tab, and then I go here and I just close this tab up because I don't want it open in the Cloud9 interface. I just want a separate tab. Now it should update as you make changes. Okay, so going back to here, we're just going to make some styles. So a couple things we'll do, real basic stuff to start. I'm going to make a style, and I'm going to do a style for an asterisk, which means everything. It's a wildcard, and I'm just going to do my opening and closing curly brackets there. Now I get a little warning. It says the universal selector slows things down. Don't worry about that right now. And I'm going to do a margin, and I'll put 0, and then I'll also put padding, and I'll put 0. So I'll set them both to 0. This basically resets them. I basically put 2 CSS declarations here, one for margin, one for padding, and when you have zeros you don't have to put px. But this asterisk means everything, and what should happen here, it should reset everything, which will look odd. Matter of fact, the bullets and everything will get pushed off the page. That kind of whites things out so we can kind of reset our own, and it kind of overrides default. So that's what we're going to do. And that's the first thing we're going to do, and then we're also going to center our page. Now to do that, we're going to use body, and we're going to put a body element, and we're going to say for our entire body, everything within the body tags, we're going to say margin, and we're going to say auto. Now what auto does is it puts auto space on either side. Now when I do that, you won't see anything happen. Look, nothing happened. But that's because you need to specify a width in order to do that. The width can be in percentage, it can even be in pixels. We're going to use pixels because our image is 18 pixels, or because our image is 800 pixels, we're going to make the width of our body 800 pixels. So I need to put that in, and I should probably put it first because it makes sense, because you should have a width before you have margin, even though it won't matter. and I'm going to put PX. And remember, with CSS, you have to put PX and make sure you're putting your semicolons. Be very careful about how you put this up. The space doesn't matter. You can have a space or not a space. I'm putting a space just because it looks better. And what should happen right now, when I go in here, you can see it's centering all the body. And if I resize my page, it's staying within that area. So it's putting auto margin on either side of this right now. So that's an easy way to kind of center something in your window. I'm centering all my body. And some people make containers and things like that, but we're just going to center our body right now. We're going to make changes as we go. So everything's centered. Now, obviously, we have to fix this area in the middle here. And we're kind of working from bigger to smaller. And what I'm also going to do for body is I'm going to give a background color of white, because if you remember on that sample that we had, it had white kind of in the body and it had an off-white. So I'm going to use white. Now you might say, well, why are you putting white here? And actually, let me do this first. Since body's kind of the next biggest one, I'm going to put one in between here. I'm going to put HTML. I'm going to put an HTML selector here. And there's my closing tag. And I'll put a background color. And we have to put background dash color. And you might say, well, what background color do you want to use? And what, if you're not sure, we were just looking at our image. You know, here's our header here. Here's our header. We want to use something kind of off-whitish, like kind of in the ice there. Just kind of a beigey, kind of, beigey putty kind of color I think we want to use. So in order to do that, we can't really eyedrop from that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my favorite color webpage called htmlcolorcodes.com. That's htmlcolorcodes.com. And if you go down here to this little mixer, and there's different places that have mixers, I'm just going to go find something just kind of puttyish right now. Nothing really, it doesn't matter that much. And here's a hex up here. You could copy it over here. I'm going to copy it here because it'll have the pound sign in front of it. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go back to here, or actually back to here, and I'm going to put that as a background color. And you might say, well, what's that going to do? And you can see what that does. It puts that beigey color in the background, but now it makes it for everything. Now if I put a background color of body, it should only make this part white. So I'm going to go back to my body, and you know what? Instead of retyping anything, I'm just going to copy that one so I don't have to retype background color, and I'm going to make it white. And you should know from your hex colors that white is FFF, and that's a shortcut for FFFFF. So you could do that, and what should happen, it should make that white, and it should keep that beige. So that's what we want so far. So we're actually doing okay, and you can see we're going to need spacing, and then we'll kind of dig down into our fonts and things like that. So we're trying to do our bigger things first. So let's go back. We have everything reset. We have HTML, we have body. Now let's just take a look at our HTML and see what we're dealing with before we move on here, and I'll just take some space out of that. I'm going to move down. Now remember, we have body, we have our header in here, and we also have a main section. There's a main section, and that includes, the main section is kind of where the white is. It's below our header, and that starts with the H1 tag. It has our 2 paragraphs, it has our 2 lists, and it has all that kind of stuff. So we're going to be dealing with that, and one thing I want to do is put some space in the main. You see this main area here. I'm going to put basically padding in there because everything's inside the main. I don't want to put padding on body because it'll include that. And just to see, if I put padding in this, remember padding's on the inside. If I do padding, and padding, just by doing padding, that means it'll go around all 4 sides. If I did like 20 pixels for now, we'll just try that out. And if I do padding and I go over here, you can see what that does. It does padding around my image. I don't want that. I just want padding in here. And again, we'll fix that stuff, but we want padding all around. We don't want it there. So what we could do is, instead of having padding inside body, we'll put padding inside main. So I'm going to cut that out of there, and I'll backspace, and I'll make one for main. And again, I'm trying to go from the biggest, this is everything, and then HTML and body, and then I'll do one for main. Now main is an element, so you could just call it main like that. It's an HTML element, and I'll paste this in here so that padding's in there. Now let's see the difference. That's what we want. It has that 20 pixels all around, and I think that's okay as far as what we're doing. You might say, well, why is that? Why doesn't there no margin down there? We know why there's no margin here, or padding. It's because we have to move over our list, because that's actually where it is, where you see that the text is actually where it would be. But why is it not down here? And if you look at our HTML, you can see that our footer is not inside of main, and that's okay because we're actually going to put it on the other side of the white side. right now. Right now it's inside, but we're going to move it out and give it a beige, the same beige background color, so it looks like it's outside of that. Now, one thing we could also do, since we're messing around with main right now, as far as the main element, is let's put a border on here. Now, to put a border takes 3 properties. So I'm going to put border, and the 3 properties that border takes is the thickness, which I'm just going to put like 2px for now, the style, which I'm going to put solid, and then also the color, which I'm not sure about the color. So I'm going to go to color codes, and I'm just going to do like a dark gray. So I'm going to mix up kind of a warm dark gray for border, and I'm just going to do that. And you could use just something similar. So I'll go back here, and you just have to paste it in. A couple things about border: when you have those 3 properties, there's no, or I guess these are the values. Border is the property, the values are here, and the values are 2px solid. And notice there's no commas in there, so don't put commas in there. Let's see what that looks like. And that's kind of what I want. We have some issues here. This is okay because the footer is actually below that, so that's okay. This is a problem, and I'm not sure what exactly causes that, but it's easy to fix, and I'll show you that, and then we'll take a break, I think. But one thing we have to fix here with that is if we go to the header, and remember this is the header element that includes that image that's in there. I'm going to put a property for that, and I'm going to put it actually before main, only because even though it's not really a bigger area, it actually shows up before that. So I'm going to put header, and what I'm going to put is just the height. And you might say, well, do you need a height? No, but if you put a height of whatever the image is, if I look down here, if the image is 280, if I put a height of 280, it doesn't seem to get that little gap in there. And again, I'm not sure what causes that gap. Every semester I say the same thing. I'm not sure what causes that gap, but whatever, I know what fixes it. And by putting the height in here, that seems to fix it, putting the height of that element. So if I go in there, that fixes it. At least that fixes that area there. This we're going to take care of. We're going to take care of the footer next, and then we'll deal with the stuff in here. So I'm going to save this, save your index HTML, and make sure, don't go up here, make sure to go down here to File, Save, and make sure you save everything of that file that you're working on for your ex2. And so we just basically had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 CSS declaration blocks to start, and we're kind of working very big, and then we're going to work in more detailed in here and work on some of the spacing things and also some of the spacing for the footer. So we're off to a good start. So I'm going to take a break here, and that's basically part 2, because part 1 was the overview. So we're going to move on with part 3, where we're going to hopefully finish up the inside of this.